We are good to go.
All right, very good. Let's get the show on the road here. All right, so welcome everybody to the January 19th, 2023 meeting of CV6 Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, chair of the committee, and this meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m. this evening. And tonight we're joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. I think most of you are aware that New York State law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on, their first and last name displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards the quorum. Members of the public, I see we have a few on tonight. You can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there's time following the committee's discussion, we'll field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. So if you're able to do the meeting summary, please raise your hand through Zoom. Of course, we have the doodle poll. I know there's some new committee members and a few people. So if anybody's able to do that, I can't see the hands, Brandon.
I see Seema's hand is raised.
Oh, terrific. Seema, thank you.
Yeah, happy to take minutes.
Excellent. Thanks, Seema. All right. So that brings us to the attendance, and Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser. Stu Desser. Okay, I see that Stu is here. May be having technical difficulties though, but Stu is counted as present. Eric Goldberg. Eric Goldberg.
Oh, that's not working.
Yeah, I can hear you sort of,
Okay.
but you're counted as present. Sadie Howard.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
And Seligman, I know, is not able to join us tonight. Seema Shaw.
Present.
And Lou Sapersky.
Yo.
We have a quorum.
And just making sure you can hear me now, right?
Yep, I can hear you now. And your count is present, just for the record.
All right. Thanks, Brendan. So as you can see on the screen here, we have the agenda for tonight's meeting, which was also distributed ahead of time by the board office. Committee members, if there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you do object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. And the meeting summary from the October 20th committee meeting a little while back was distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we'll adopt the meeting summary as drafted. If you have any corrections or changes, you may raise your hand for Zoom. Seeing none, the meeting summary from the October 20th meeting is adopted and will be available on the CV6 website. All right, the ground rules, I think most of you are familiar with this. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. Chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information, such as an email address that was already stated aloud on the record. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you. You can unmute yourself so you can speak. And remember, Zoom cameras and first and last names must be displayed. All right, so committee business here. So we're going to get into a few different items. Also we're going to first talk about the security at the New Providence Women's Shelter. I'll bring you up to speed on that in just a moment. And then we'll delve into some fire safety concerns. I know a few board members for the new year wanted to discuss the concerns in the aftermath of the fire that took place in our district earlier in November, beginning of November that was. And then we'll talk about the drag story hour protests. And a couple of the committee members have drafted a resolution there that we'll get into for agenda item number 3. So to set the stage here for the first item. So as most of you should be aware, the obviously it's been discussed at full board and in other and been reported throughout the news media, but back in mid-December there was a fatal stabbing at the New Providence Women's Shelter that you'll recall that, and for those who were on the committee back in June, we did discuss this, discuss shelter security back in June after the police department raised some concerns about what they were seeing over there. And now we've had the stabbing over there. Still a lot of unanswered questions. I don't have a lot of new information. We did invite DHS to join us tonight, but they were unable to do so. But I believe they're looking to join us in February. So at that point, we will have a continued discussion on the matter. But that shouldn't impact tonight's discussion. I do want to go over a couple things here. So is everybody? So it's just nodding your heads. Informal survey. How many are familiar with this issue and generally know what happened? Right? You can nod yes or no. Or if you want me to go into a little more detail, I can.
Yes, I'd appreciate some detail. This is Seema.
Okay. All right. So I mean, basically, so a dispute between two roommates occurred. Escalated, led to a brutal stabbing. So I think the first question that's been raised is, how did a knife get through the security screening process, and whatnot? That has not been answered. That is a question that I would like to hear an answer from DHS, because this security, we're not, I don't know the nature of the security contract and then the provider, but basic screening should have caught that knife before it got in there, for one. So that, and then also pairing of roommates is another thing, another security concern that we might want to look at. But basically, a dispute escalated, and the victim was stabbed, and then brought to Bellevue Hospital and pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Took place late on a Friday evening in mid-December. And that's about all the information there is. As far as the law enforcement angle, the case was closed when the individual turned herself in after a couple of days, pled guilty to the charges. So, Brendan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just saying that the individual also, I know, ran away and was at large until she turned herself in. So another question that at least I have is, how was the individual able to run away?
Yeah. I mean, and that's certainly a fair question. I mean, I'm not sure what the monitoring process is. So those are things DHS can hopefully answer when they join us. But I do want to turn to the letter that Keith Powers sent over. Brendan, if you can put that up. I'm not sure if we shared this with the committee, but we can certainly do so. So Keith sent a letter to DHS, basically requesting DHS police being reinstated. So I'll give you guys a minute to read it, but it basically says, it acknowledges our committee discussion back in June, and along with other reports, and now the incident that took place in December. So is that too small for everyone? I don't know. I think, Brendan, I don't think we need the header so much, but maybe there's a way to enlarge it with the body. I don't know my glasses with me right here, but I can still see it.
Is that better?
A little bit, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that's better if we can just scroll to the body of the message. Yeah. That's cool.
You also don't necessarily need the signature. I mean,
And
it's relevant, but
yeah, it's there, but we don't need to see it. So yeah, I mean, so I think that's where it is. It's right now. The update from Keith's office as of yesterday is DHS did not respond to the letter other than acknowledging receipt of it. So I don't know anything beyond that. So that's really where we are right now. So I see two options here for the committee. We can pass a resolution along the lines of this, or we can wait to hear from DHS next month, assuming they're willing to join us. And Brendan, I don't know if we've discussed dates with them to confirm their availability. It's one thing to say that they'd like to come in February, and then we tell them it's on such and such a date, and then they're like, "Oh, we can't make it." So we'll get into that. I see a couple hands, so I'm going to go to Steve, followed by Stu. Steve, go ahead.
Question about the current security situation there. It's been a while. I used to live a block away from this facility, and I do recall ages ago that they had security metal detectors, but it's been in quite a while. So is the current state under Project, I believe this is being operated by Project Renewal. But is the current state that there is no security at that facility? No security at the front desk, no metal detectors, nothing to that used to be there?
No, so I mean, what happened is basically DHS Police was the security provider until I believe January 2021, when DHS selected a private security provider. Cost cutting and budgetary reasons were to blame there. But what we're seeing, so I mean, they do. I would imagine they still have metal detectors and a screening process, but it's not. You know, there's too many, like we talked about in June. You know, there's been a lot of questionable disputes that have escalated. They're clearly not well trained in de-escalating things. So, you know, it's everybody is, from the police department to myself to now Councilmember Powers, feels that that's inadequate for this setting. So there is security, it's private security, but obviously when a knife gets in there like that, you know, I question how effective it is. So that's really where we're at. Did that answer your question? I wish I had a better answer.
No, that's fine. One last question. Sorry. You alluded to a pairing process with roommates. I assume that you have additional information how roommates are paired. Is this a process that's done by the local service there or by DHS? Is it something that needs to be bolstered, better screened? Can you go into it in further detail?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, that was one of the questions that I would like to hear an answer from DHS. I can say based on what I know from the police responses, they could do a better job there. So I know we're dealing with a lot of women with different issues, but police department feels that it should be better. There's a better way that they never used to. When DHS police was in charge, there were no issues of that nature. So that would be a great question. We can ask them, but so far I'm not liking what I'm seeing. All right, Stu, did you have a question?
What's the normal process? What's the normal screening in any shelter? I mean, do you usually walk through a metal detector? Or?
Yeah, I mean, from the shelters that I've served on advisory boards for, I mean, most will have a screening process. I think some of the smaller shelters are a little less, but it really depends on the clientele. So in a situation like this where you're dealing with people some who have substance abuse issues, drug problems. Yeah, metal detectors are certainly standard. If you're dealing with a family shelter situation where you're not dealing with those issues, there's different security protocols, but it depends honestly on the provider and the size of the shelter and the clientele. But I mean, if you go to 30th Street, the men's shelter, also in our district, metal detectors are in use every time you go through there. So I mean, it's a pretty rigorous, like airport style screening process at that facility. But metal detectors are in use in most places. Obviously, things can get through, but that's really that's pretty standard in a shelter of this nature. And of course, Keith also alludes to in the expansion that's happening in this too. So I think another reason we need to get things under control there. Brendan?
I just wanted to answer Steve's question about the whole roommate situation. So part of why the whole roommate question exists is that, at least based off of some of the news reports about this stabbing, this roommate pairing that included the victim as well as the alleged perpetrator, apparently they had a history that predated the stabbing, and they had disputes that predated the stabbing, which raises questions, not just about de-escalation, but what happens when there is a bad roommate situation, which, at least based off of some of the interviews of some of the other residents there after the stabbing, sounds like was the case.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, news reports are just news reports, but I think you can read what's happening there. But it sounds like from the reports there definitely were warning signs, and this probably could have been separated earlier or anything got out of hand. Seema?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the fiscal relationship. So DHS has to pay NYPD to have NYPD officers in DHS shelters. Is that just accurate?
No, so what I think happens, I mean, DHS, sometimes they call them peace officers or police off. I mean, it's basically a police unit under the umbrella of DHS, which is exclusively designed for shelters, or maybe in some cases like 30th Street, the perimeter of the shelters. But with budget cuts, pretty much all agencies have had budget cuts. So, they've had to cut back the number of facilities that they can have those officers in. And so they protected 30th Street for obvious reasons. It's just the largest facility. So if you only have enough resources, once you downsize, they had to make some cuts. But they have arrest capability. So they're not NYPD, but they have arrest capability, and they're capable of basically handling a lot of things internally before they spill out into the neighborhood. And obviously, when you don't have DHS police, it falls to the local precinct NYPD to patrol and basically address all the issues. So they get called for 911 pretty much anytime something gets out of hand. So that's the distinction there between DHS and NYPD. But it's, I can say from 30th Street, we just had a meeting with them, I think, in November or December. And, I mean, they're definitely the DHS officers in 30th Street are really focused on de-escalation. And they're, so much so that they're going, they're doing a lot more programming to try to build relationships with the compliance there. So it just goes to show you that, you know, I can tell you for certain that there's no relationship building of any meaningful kind happening at the women's shelter with the current security operator. So it just goes to show you that that if you're willing to spend the money, or you can, you know, find the money, there's a much better product out there to keep everybody safe. And of course, you know, I don't want the street homeless population to just be fearful of the shelters either. That is another piece to this here, that every time there's an incident, such as a murder or any kind of stabbing or, you know, brutal assaults, the street population hears about it too. It makes them even more afraid to enter the system. So I think, you know, we're not the homeless and housing committee, but I think from a safety perspective, we have to keep that in mind, too, that you know, you want a safe environment, obviously, for the people inside the building, but you also want a safe facility where the population that's choosing to remain on the streets can actually avail themselves to and feel comfortable inside. So, any other questions, comments, thoughts on this? Stephen?
I always thought DHS always had funding challenges for things like police, like their own security, like administrative. But speaking specifically on public safety, how are they able to fund additional security? Is it something of a one-off basis, or is it something that has to be brought up from the community, like a community board like this? Like, what are the challenges from their side to get essentially de-escalation peace officers out on site?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a question. You know, I mean, in any budget, there's plenty of money floating around. It's just a question of where they choose to spend it. You know, I don't know exactly what the cost is, but obviously they were affording it, you know, up until 2 years ago. So, you know, it can't be that far away. They might have to reshuffle some things around within the agency, but, you know, I think from a community perspective, we need to speak loudly and clearly that it's a priority and it needs to be taken seriously. That, you know, you can't just cut corners on security and expect it to work. So I think that should be, in my mind, that should be the view from the community. Keith has already, you know, taken the initiative in sending a letter requesting such. So I feel the community board should follow suit and really, you know, make it clear that we're not going to accept inadequate security. I mean, because it's a risk to our communities too. These things spill out onto the streets. I'm sure the people in the neighborhood, in the blocks surrounding the facility, will also tell us that there's a lot of things happening in parks and public spaces that could probably be contained inside the facility. So does anyone want to write a resolution along the lines of what Keith put forth in that letter? Just gauging committee interest. Or do we feel that, because the other option is if we don't pass a resolution tonight, we can, I mean, it is sort of time sensitive because, I mean, every month that goes by, you know, it's another month that the agency can basically kick the can down the road. So they did not respond quickly to Keith's letter with an affirmative response. They acknowledged receipt, but that's about it. So, you know, I think a little more support is necessary from the community. So does anybody want to entertain that?
Hey, Matt.
Hold on,
I was
hands
gonna
up.
say,
Who's is that Eric? Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, no one was going. So yeah, I was just going to say I'm certainly supportive of what you shared, but I'm just not in a position to write the resolution right now. But just wanted to let you know that I'm supportive of what you put forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, in order to write,
Yeah.
in order for anyone to actually, the committee would have to vote in favor of a resolution. That's what I was
Yeah.
kind of gauging, where the committee lies and stands on this. Stu?
Uh, it seems to me that if we called someone from DHS to appear before our meeting next month, and they've got, in light of Keith's letter, that might put some pressure on them. So they would not only be forced to come here and answer questions, but they'd answer questions on why they didn't act on his letter. So I would not, object if we didn't write a resolution this month, but invited them to speak next month. And we could prepare a resolution in advance if they don't show up.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan will have to chime in on the likelihood of them actually showing up. I mean, he reached out at least 3 times, from what I could see, before they even said that they were not able to join us. So it's not like they just got the invite. They sat on it for basically 4 weeks or whatever, and decided not to join us. So I'd give them the benefit of the doubt that if they say they're going to show up in February, that they do, but we haven't discussed dates yet, to make sure it fits their calendar. But that's something Brendan can work out with the agency. So I mean, I could go either way on this. I see both angles, but I mean, I think I don't want to say there, but yeah, we can pass something tonight, or we can pass something next month, based on what we hear. So it's up to you guys. Anyone else?
I'm just going to also add that I like to see the language of resolutions before we vote on them. So, I'd be more comfortable if we had a draft ready for next month, while we have this invitation to them pending, and they can either show up or not, and we'll have language on which we can vote.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because yeah, I mean, we can write, I can work with somebody on drafting a resolution. But obviously it's, the nature of the resolution, some things may change once they present to us. So if assuming they do follow through on their word to join us next month. So all right, so maybe what we'll do is we'll prepare a resolution. Does anyone want to work with me on that? I mean, you could basically take the letter, and put it into a resolution form, and throw in a few more things, and then we can add a few whereas clauses if they actually, with other pertinent information that they inform us. All right. Does that sound good?
One quick note, I see that Anne Hirsch from Friends of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza has her hand raised.
Oh, okay.
Shall I give her the ability to talk?
Sure. Yeah, we can hear from Anne.
Okay, Anne, you should be able to talk.
Go ahead, Anne.
You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I hear DHS come up over and over again. What I'm not hearing is Project Renewal, who is the operator. Is Project Renewal, I think it's the subcontractor. They run the shelter. Are they not responsible also?
No, everybody, I mean, so DHS provides oversight. So they would be ultimately the government body that would be responsible.
And then, but in terms of costs and hiring security, isn't Project Renewal also expected to pay some of those costs, or is the whole budget with DHS?
No, I believe it's a city funded thing. So DHS is responsible for the contracts, or at least they
So
have.
in other words, Project Renewal, then if I'm to understand correctly, only gets income. They don't have expenses.
Yeah, I'm not exactly familiar with the financial arrangement, but we can certainly, make sure that they're a part of the conversation. But DHS is the government body that we need to speak to make sure that.
Who decides the kind of programming, the way the whole show is operated? Who does that? Project
that's-
Renewal or DHS?
So that Project Renewal would work on the programming, from what I understand. But as far as security goes, DHS is responsible for the security operation, providing security operator and the contract there.
Well, I really am drawn in by your whole discussion, and I think you're covering so many important points. And of course, it spills out into the streets and into our neighborhoods. That goes without saying. But I come back to how this shelter functions, and the very fact that it has all of these problems within. Naturally, they're going to flow out into the street where there is even less security. So I think everybody needs to be present at the table that has to do with how this operation is run, is administered.
Yep, don't disagree. Yeah, we're trying to dig into it as best we can, but a lot of the agencies that don't want to work with us, or at least we're short-staffed and don't have the resources. So
well, they have one of the larger budgets. We all know that. So even if their budget was cut, they have a huge budget compared to the Parks Department, for example.
Yep, I hear you. So thanks, Ann. We'll keep
Thank
after
you.
it.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Sure, we'll try to get you the best answers we can on the whole operations. But I've been reluctant to delve into the operations part of it because we're not the homeless committee. I don't want to, and housing committee, so I don't want to step on their toes. That's really a conversation that Rich and his committee can be having.
Are they discussing this incident at all? Is it on their agenda?
I don't believe it's on their agenda because it's really a security thing right now. But they have it. The expansion and everything has come up, has been on the agenda previously, and I'm sure if there's an operations need, they'll be happy to address it. We can work through that on the executives committee side.
Well, everybody at CB6 voted for the expansion, so I think all the community committees and have a responsibility to make this work.
Yeah, I hear you. We're gonna do the best we can as a public safety committee. So thanks, Ann. I'm gonna move on to I believe Steve, you have your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Double clicking on what Ann has mentioned, about Project Renewal, I agree. That's certainly a focus for a different committee. But having had some experience with Project Renewal, there must be a conduit to help communicate with the other committee to at least speak to that organization. I know they're very program focused. They do have at times sent out their form of security to basically just keep some level of peace around the neighborhood in and outside within their immediate facility. But at least in that perspective, it does make sense if the other committee does have a chance to talk to them. It's something that I've seen with that particular organization. It just seems like challenging on us because in terms of just a public safety, it doesn't feel like it falls on the responsibility of that program. I haven't seen it done successfully on that side. So I see your argument for DHS police, but I think it still begs to hold that, should we bring this up as a, I mean, do we communicate with the homeless and housing committee to bring this up as a subject of inquiry to that organization? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, we can discuss it at either at the executive committee or have a joint meeting. If there's need to have a public meeting, then we would have a joint meeting. But I'm really only asking this committee to consider the safety and the security, specifically the security piece of it. From that conversation, there's really nothing to directly involve them in. Obviously, they're aware it's on the agenda, but there's really no action for them to take. But if we want to have joint conversations, if next month's meeting is not productive and we do want to have a joint meeting and cover security and programming, then we can have a joint meeting down the road. But I think this specifically is a security issue we can tackle as a public safety. Seema?
Yeah, just one quick comment. I think the reason that I'm personally hesitating to support a resolution, whether this month or next month, is mostly because I don't know what the cost benefit analysis of this whole thing is. So I see Keith's letter says, we want to restore DHS police back to the facility or to the shelter. But what does that cost? How will that impact other programming? How does that dovetail with what you were telling us, kind of the de-escalation tactics that they're already thinking about? It's just kind of I think the way he framed it, it's it's a nice, obviously it's a necessary thing we need, but I want to know at what cost. So that's really where I'm kind of struggling in terms of, maybe we can add that in terms of the questions we ask if DHS does come.
Yeah, we can ask them. We also did invite Keith Powers' office to come tonight, but unfortunately, Ben was not able to join, and Patrick is away with his family. So they would have preferred, they would have liked to join, and probably would have been able to shed some light on the budget costs there. But perhaps get some clarity on that. But as far as agency level decisions, there's just not a lot of public information out there. So they may or may not be willing to disclose the specifics that you're trying to get. I would love to see it, but I would love to see an organizational chart of DHS myself personally, but there's just a lot of things internally that they keep under wraps. So we can ask and try to get as much info as we can. I have low confidence that they'll be willing to tell us everything that we want to know, because they don't really have to. Anything else on this topic? So it sounds like the committee wants to wait until next month, and then we'll see what they have to say, and we'll invite a few other parties to be part of the conversation, and we'll hopefully get to the bottom of it. All right. So seeing no objection, we'll move on to agenda item number 2. If there's anybody that would like to draft a resolution on this pre-decisional for next month, just shoot me an email. Otherwise, I will have something that we can work from. All right. All right, let's go to agenda item number 2. So fire safety concerns from electronic mobility devices. I believe there's, from what I've heard from Keith's office and a couple other city council people, is there's 4 or 5 bills out there on this. The 2 that I found deal with really dealing with more information around lithium ion batteries and the e-bikes. Of course, for those who are not familiar with the backstory here, and we have a couple of new committee members, and it's also been a long holiday season for some. So this is in response to the calls to take action in the aftermath of the fire that took place in early November, which was ultimately traced to a battery that was being replaced or repaired for an e-bike. So there's a lot of e-bikes out there. So it's still relatively new for a lot of people. So my take on it is, I don't think we need to ban these things right away. I think, first initial step would be to, create better information streams, better inform people of what the dangers are. And that's, if you read the two bills that Brendan circulated, that's really more along the lines of what they were getting at. Is one would be public information campaigns, I believe, and another would be at the point of sale, where there'd be some informational pieces that would have to be conveyed to anybody that's buying. So I think you're dealing with a lot of people that have e-bikes. It's not just e-bikes, but they're the big culprit here. And they just may not be aware of the dangers. So Stu, question,
Thanks.
comment?
Certainly information is important, and a lot of people don't understand the dangers of buying secondhand batteries, of rebuilding them, of using a mismatched charger, which is apparently responsible for overheating the batteries, and once they overheat, they can ignite.
Sure.
I'm not one of the things that came out in the hearings, the city council hearings, is that apparently the UL certified batteries, and the only manufacturer who uses those apparently, who's got UL certification, is Bosch. They don't seem to have any problems. I mean, I would like to have somebody here we can ask, but there was something like 188 fires last year, and none of them, to my knowledge, was attributed to the UL certified battery. And I also did not hear that the city bikes, and city has the class 1 pedal assisted bikes, apparently they haven't had any issues either. So part of the issue is that batteries that are certified are either safe or safer. They also cost a whole lot more money. There are some proposals for the delivery people, for instance, who can't afford these expensive bikes. If there were a charging station where you can swap out the batteries, none of them seem like really ideal proposals. But it sounds like what the city has to do is insist that any battery used in the city is just UL certified, and which hopefully would bring prices down. The intros that we saw, 663, penalizes the sale, but not the purchase of the ownership of 9UL approved batteries. So the battery could be legally purchased outside the city and used here too. And I think with 752 or 752, yeah. That doesn't make it illegal to buy, keep, or to use devices that have second use, these rebuilt batteries. So there's a lot of holes in the city council proposition. I also wonder what exactly we as the community board should be doing. This really is an issue that's and as you know, I mean, I do believe that the grassroots level is important, and we should support and encourage citywide action. But I'm not sure in this case where we should go with this, except to propose that everything be UL certified or something like that.
Yeah, good points, Stu. I mean, I think this is going to be difficult to wrap our hands around until the federal government basically puts in standards around this. So, I mean, I feel like New York City can pass any bill that they want to pass, but the reality of it being forcible and, effective would be very difficult, I would think.
Oh, I should also just add that the MTA is looking at people bringing these personal mobility devices on the Long Island Railroad, and I presume the subway. So there's another parallel look. My impression, and I don't have really good inside information, is that the MTA is a little more willing to ban stuff. And I think we have to be really careful about that, because there's a lot of human beings who rely on these devices. And I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the MTA can ban a lot of things, but it almost doesn't make sense unless they're going to enforce it. So it's, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of rules on the subway, on the bus that are not being enforced today. So I don't think that would be anything to worry about. They got bigger issues in the transit world. But so let's put it this way. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of any of the bills in the city council. Personally, I just don't think, I know everybody kind of wants to take action in the aftermath of some dangerous fires and whatnot. I just don't think it's gonna be very effective. You could sell me on better information campaigns, I think, at this point, because I did not know a lot of the dangers of these until I read about it as the chair of the Public Safety Committee. So there's certainly a lot of people out there that probably just aren't aware. So I think that, at a minimum, is the first step in this. As far as regulations go, it's ultimately going to come from the federal government. I personally wouldn't even worry about these. I wouldn't worry about supporting or not supporting these city council intros. I think the root of it is going to have to be federal regulations and federal standards on this one to be effective. Bikes, people commute, people travel around. So New York City specific laws just won't hold up on this one. But that's just my take. I want to hear from some others on this. Basically, the big question here is, in the aftermath of the fire that took place in our district, what action do we feel is appropriate, if any? It's an unfortunate tragedy, but I don't know that there's any one thing or anything that we can do that would specifically specifically cut down on these in the future. Sadie, go ahead.
So what I'm sort of understanding is that, I'm not trying to downplay anything, but this doesn't seem to be at least for now, a regular occurrence. Has it only really happened just this one time?
It was once in our district, but there's been hundreds of similar fires in and around the area. But it was brought to the full board's attention by some board members in the aftermath, because this one happened to be a big one. And it happened to be in our backyard. So that's the only reason that it became a time sensitive matter here. There were some bills in the city council prior to this, but it's one of those things where a lot of these bills just kind of sit in committee and they never move forward. So I don't think any of these bills that I've read, and there may be more out there that I haven't read, but none of them sound perfect to me. So, I'm certainly fine with not taking any action. I don't think we need to pass resolutions supporting these verbatim. If there's a couple of things that we want to pull out from some of these bills or add in on our own that we think would be productive, that's fine too. But I think we should say something in the aftermath of this incident. I don't know that it has to be along the lines of what the bills are stating, but I think we can put our heads together and come up with a couple of bullet points that make sense going forward, or at least give the elected officials avenues that they should explore. Steve?
Thank you. I think attacking the technology doesn't make sense. It just ends up being an endless effort trying to plug up every loophole. And that doesn't serve the purpose of what we're trying to focus at. The thing that do make sense is some of the behavioral things that the people that residents have seen. It's not all of a sudden he became a person that, oh, we never expected it. In addition to that, we could lend ourselves to some things that other organizations have done. For instance, the airline industry monitors, as an example, how much wattage battery that you can carry on to your carry-on only. Now, if the members of that dense building realizes the behavior of that resident, and then also realizes he's carrying, you don't need a lot of batteries, not like to operate your one bike. He had many bikes, he had many batteries. In a lot of cases, the battery that comes with the bike is enough to supply you for a day's, a couple of days worth of a normal commuter. Even for a commercial employee that uses for deliveries, they don't need stacks of batteries to operate that one bike. So a combination of the behavioral aspect of it, the stocking of all these electric components in a one unit, those I think make a lot more sense than trying to attack the technology itself. Because like you said, this micromobility aspect, a lot of people depend on it. A lot of people need it to do their jobs, get to work, or even just to enjoy. But it's not the technology we should attack. We should attack the things that are indicators of abusive behavior of that technology, like maybe in some ways to observe how the members of that building can be empowered to do an investigation of someone with that bad behavior, stockpiling of batteries. It's a little bit weird when one single resident have that much equipment. Things of that nature makes more sense to me than to look at lithium ion, look at, vendor specific or tester specific type, it gets a little nuanced after that. So at the end of the day, we want to empower the agencies that exists rather than having them to police another thing and then add another thing that lists, attacking the technology is just going to be endless, a nightmare.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. Keep in mind, let's think this through in terms of what a resolution might look like on this. So maybe it's more, I think one bullet point might be of what you were just saying, that it's more, it's more how people behave versus the technology itself. We were to give, let's say 3 to 5 bullet points on, on what we were going to say, our recommendations to public officials on this would be, it's not so much the technology, it's not so much the battery, it's not so much the technology, it's more, it's more how people use it, which I think also stems from the amount of public information that's out there, which is the only reason that I keep going back to. We need some better public info out there. So I think, to your point, people are making some bad decisions with how they use this stuff. They may be doing it deliberately, or they may just not know. It's hard to say. Let's go to Brendan and then Stu.
Yeah, just a couple quick things. First of all, just wanted to flag the comment that someone made in the Q&A, John Sullivan. Second of all, just a quick note, speaking of legislation, I know Ben Jacobs, the chief of staff at Councilmember Keith Powers' office, said that he's hoping to send some other legislation to Matt and I that is relevant to this issue. Not sure what that legislation will be, but I just also wanted to add that little note that there may be other pieces of legislation beyond what I sent to the committee that may be relevant.
Yeah, I think there are a few other bills out there. I couldn't find them, and it certainly wasn't high on his radar to to get the info over to us. I think so. Reading between the lines, I take it to mean that they're supportive of some of these bills, but they're not going to be anything that's a high priority. So, which is why I would try to steer the committee away from what the bills say, and as community members, what are 3 to 5 common sense, logical bullet points of things that we should pursue. We're not experts here on lithium ion. Some of you might be, but you're not required to be for the purposes of this conversation. You may or may not be an e-bike user. So I mean, we're not experts in the field. So what direction would we want public officials and the electeds to take on this? I mean, for me, number one is public information. 2 is probably more research on the technology before you take any. I mean, I'm sure they're holding hearings in committee and whatnot, but I think there's from what I've seen, there's a knee-jerk reaction to kind of put the brakes on some of these things prematurely. So anyway, sorry, Stu.
I'm going to take a position sort of in the middle of everything. I do think technology is part of it. It's not just bad behavior. These batteries, and some of it, you're right, is about knowledge. If you don't know that you can't use the wrong recharger, you don't know that you can cause these things to ignite and have a runaway fire. These things can also ignite or explode if they're subject to blunt force. And what I believe we heard some witnesses at the hearing talk about is some public witnesses is, they don't know where. So one person runs an extension cord down to the lobby of her building and recharges it down there, and people object to that. But she does that because she doesn't want to block the door that is her exit from the apartment. So I think technology is part of it. I do agree that we should not condemn lithium ion batteries, but clearly there's a deficiency in the way some of these pieces of equipment are manufactured. So it's not just human behavior, and I don't think we know from the data that was presented, at least at the city council hearing, how much of this is bad behavior. Obviously, some of it is. But you also have restaurant workers who ride 100 miles a day, and they need to recharge the battery in the middle of the day, and they may have to do it at their work site. And there's nothing they can do about that, and there's nothing that looks wrong with that. So I think after blathering for several minutes now, I think that I think we need to really focus on the technology as well as educating people as to what is safe and what is not safe. If you don't have the money, though, you're going to look for a secondhand battery, and you're going to buy the less expensive equipment. One of the proposals by a member of some organization at the city council was that that there should be some kind of subsidy, which I don't think is necessarily practical. But I do think if all of these personal mobility devices had to be certified, UL certified or by someone else, which again is more of a federal or a state or at least a citywide thing, then economic forces might bring the prices down of some of them, and up. It would be more expensive than the cheap ones now, but the better ones, they would cost less than the $3,000 Bosch.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure price and the overall economics are a big factor there. Versus safety. Unfortunately, you get what you pay for sometimes. All right. So that being said, as far as direction, I know we're an hour into this meeting. We still have one more agenda item that we need to cover. So where do we want to go on this? We should say something. It doesn't have to be tremendously long or complicated. And we certainly don't need to get into the weeds of technology and lithium-ion batteries. But I think we should acknowledge the tragedy that took place in November in our district. Like I said, one would be information campaigns. Two would probably be some, certain education requirements on the shops to convey to the people they're selling to. Because I mean, if you go into a store and let's say a product you're buying has certain technology and you're not familiar with it, isn't it the salesperson that usually informs you? Just trying to think of how information would flow ultimately to the consumer. It could be a restaurant delivery person. It could be somebody who uses an e-bike for transportation, or it could be hundreds of other occupations. So what do you guys think? I don't want to spend more than another 5-10 minutes on this. Always got to move the agenda. I think we should put out something simple, 3 bullet points, and then revisit it as more information becomes available in the coming months.
I just, sorry, this is Seema. Do we, like, what do you, I guess, what are you thinking by 2 or 3 or 3 or 5 or whatever bullet points? Like not a resolution, but just like.
No, it can be a resolution, but I mean, like, I don't want to get caught up in saying we endorse this piece of legislation or we don't agree with this piece of, because a lot of times we pass resolutions specific to a city council or bill that's pending. So I just want to kind of throw out, we can kind of acknowledge what's out there, but I didn't want to speak directly to that. I just want us to come up with our own point of view, independent of that, because I don't think there's anything that we would all agree or disagree on in those bills that would pass the committee or certainly the board right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, because it really comes down to, what do we need to do to solve this problem? I mean, 1 is better information. 2 would be, obviously cleaning up the market with, poor quality or something, but that's nothing that the city can do. There's nothing the state really can do. Maybe the second point would be we encourage the federal government to thoroughly review the technology and implement federal standards quickly on these or something like that. Because I think really that's where it's going to be driven from, not us bubbling it up to the city council or the state, because there's 49 other states, even if New York State were to take action.
Except as a community board, we probably have a little bit more influence with the city council than we do with the federal government.
But I don't think the city council can solve the problem in this case, because it's beyond the borders of the city. So that's why I keep saying, let's focus on the big picture here. Yes, we could probably convince the city council to take another look at certain, within the city, but this is not one that I would want to waste time with the city council. To be honest, it's a federal issue, and that's the only way it's going to solve. I don't want to waste the committee's time. Steve?
Just as a reminder, we've had instances like this happen before. If you recall, hoverboards. Do you guys remember those electronic devices where you stand on your 2 feet, you lean forward, it moves forward, you lean back. There's these amazing little toys that were a huge Christmas item before the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of those started catching on fire, and it was a whole hoopla. And then the market determined that, these are terrible. The market was incredibly flooded with these different bottles, different types, and it all came down to a very similar type of story. Non-tested, poor quality, just, and others trying to modify it with bad practices. So this isn't something that's unique before. It has happened. It's that back then the battery capacities were far smaller because it only had to power a much smaller device, and much smaller capacity. So when a fire does occur, it was very localized. I believe in this recent incident in the building, they used batteries that were meant for bicycles, but several, not just one brick or two bricks of them, but several large capacity. Just, he made a little repair shop of himself, which is got to be illegal in some way in a residence. So I wonder if it makes itself, if we do research, or how did we handle this last time when those hoverboards were a problem back then? Because this has happened before. This is maybe we could lend ourselves to try to see what we did last time when those were a problem in our city.
Yeah, I mean, there's some similarity there, but I think this is going to be, I think that's not an item that's being used every day by, thousands of people potentially in a crowded city. So, I see the similarities, but I also think this is something, that's something that just kind of went away on its own because people discovered, hey, they're dangerous. I don't think e-bikes are going to go away. Like that. I think there's too much need for them in and around the city and around the country, and I think that need is only going to grow as the technology and the capabilities get better. So I don't know that we could just, I don't know what was taken, if anything. I don't think we had a public safety committee at that point. But yeah, I think we kind of have to steer this one a little bit differently because it's only going to grow. You're going to have more of these batteries out there, which is just the way it is. But we got to make sure that they're safe. Anyone else have any thoughts on this? So far we're taking no action. So if anybody wants to propose a resolution, that would be the time to do so. I want to move on to the third item. Otherwise, we'll just, this is committee discussion, and it doesn't look good. Discuss lots of issues and don't take any action. Is limited as it may be. All right, anyone? All right, I'm not seeing anyone supporting a resolution on anything here. Am I correct in that assumption?
I wouldn't mind if we brought a resolution, but I don't like to do anything that won't have any impact. So, if Brendan's going to send this to our federal senators, maybe it's worthwhile.
Yeah, if we were to put in a statement, then our elected officials in the House and Senate in Washington would certainly receive a copy of it. Otherwise, I think if we were speaking specifically to an information campaign, I think that would be more directed to the city. But if we're talking about regulations, I think that would go to the federal government. So it can be as simple as please take a look at this. We feel there's a safety issue. There've been 188 or however many fires that year or so. It should be high on people's radar. Steve, go ahead.
I wouldn't support anything that would set regulations on the technology per se. I agree that technology is part of the problem, but I feel that using something that exists today, allowing the residents of that building to raise a cause for investigation for, say, the FDNY or the NYPD to investigate wow, it's a little weird. This guy's stockpiling a lot of batteries and have loose electronics and bikes. That's lends itself where it empowers the local residents to look into situations like that. The reason why I'm so still kind of adamant about anything addressing the technology, you're right, technology is constantly changing. Today it's lithium ion, tomorrow it's going to be salt-based batteries, another type of compound, who knows, along with another type of micro mobility. So, and plus there's a market of people who are modifying their micro mobility, who are entrepreneurs to be the next Bosch, to be the next whomever. And I feel that any regulation like that, especially in New York City, makes no sense to hamper that type of growth. We don't want to be seen as the Bosch only city, the only underwriters, laboratories approved only city. It's that seems to be favoring more of a private side of the of the problem. I think it makes more sense to leverage something maybe more informationally and leading itself to empowering the local residents to investigate behavioral things. And we still need to have a better understanding of the technology before we even talk about regulating the technology, because it's right now, at least from my perspective, it seems a bit of a leap to make any regulatory conversations on technology in this conversation we're having, because it's a bit of a leap right now, because I'm still equating to like, well, there have been mobility technology in the past, different fuels in the past. You know, we've stopped that certainly in the past. You know, what's to stop the same thing here to help investigate behavior, stockpiling, making your own residence a repair shop. There was someone who's doing that with combustible engines, stocking fuel in their residence. That would be a cause and concern. So there are some parallels there, but I understand that, yes, the technology has to be observed, but I think at least in the technology discussion, it's still of a gap for any resolution on the subject of lithium ion.
So, I mean, just to clarify, when I'm saying it should be looked at, I'm saying, you know, the federal government or whoever the regulatory body would be should study it to see, you know, what, I mean, they're not going to know. They're just like us, you know, I can't tell you, you know, what the standards should be, but I mean, there needs to be a study, basically. We're not going to be doing the study ourselves, but the experts in the field should be doing that. That's really all I'm alluding to in that regard. I'm not saying they should ban the things. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't know where the safety, you know, as an average New York City resident, I don't know these things, but it's something that should be studied. And I think, you know, in the short term, getting, you know, the FDNY or whoever to put out public information, I think is critical, because I certainly don't know. I don't have an e-bike, but I can assure you, people down the hall from me do, and I certainly don't know whether they're familiar with the safety of, you know, the battery. I'm sure, you know, everybody sees the instruction manuals that come with the thing, but, you know, people throw them out pretty quickly. And don't bother reading the fine print there. So I think you need more awareness for one. And then, you know, we'll see if that solves the problem, great. If it doesn't, then you need to, you know, take more action. So anyway, we got to get out of this. Stu, I'll give you the last word.
I never want the last word, but just to note from the council hearings, it sounds like FDNY is one of the leading organizations looking into this. They've run a number of experiments, and they're you know, and other experts seem to respect what FY the New York Fire Department's doing. So they're already sort of on the case, and I expect that they would be talking with federal authorities as well. So, you know, I don't want to tell them,
Well,
I don't want
yeah.
to pass a resolution that says you should do what you're already doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's more, yeah, I mean, truthfully, we could pass no resolutions and, you know, much of the world would still be the same. With or without them. But no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's obviously work being done that we're not familiar with. And, you know, I think at some point this year, we should invite FDNY to kind of give us some safety overviews and tell us what they're working on. But we'll probably get to that probably around March or April. So, all right, let's leave this here. There's clearly no consensus on a path forward today. So I'm going to turn to agenda item number 3, which is the discussion of the Drag Story Hour protests at New York Public Library locations. So I believe Sadie and Eric have taken the lead on this one. Is Eric still on the call, or did he jump off? I don't see him
He
here.
got disconnected. I'm just trying to
okay.
send him the link. So if you could just give me
Okay.
a sec to do
All
that.
right. So I don't know, Sadie, did you want to give us an overview of how you and Eric got to this and what we should know?
Yes. So I don't know. I came to Eric because I've known Eric. I've known Eric for a long time. So I came to him and I was like, want to be more involved, want to write a resolution. And then I also happened to see a tweet from Councilman Botcher about the protests at Drag Story Hour that were happening at New York Public Libraries, that not technically in CB6, but the 58th Street Library and the main branch of the NYPL are both like right across the street from CB6. So like very accessible to like families here, and like if someone were to be a protester, then like they could very easily live in the district. And just for like even more background, DSH, or Drag Queen Story Hour, is an organization that like it works with libraries to like put on, to like have readings and like performances and like arts and crafts done by like drag artists, mainly targeted at children, but they've also done like some programs for adults and like teenagers. And as of recently, they're like starting around 6 months ago or so, people have started showing up and protesting just these performers, and their performances geared towards children, which have caused a lot of trauma to the performers and to the library staff as well. So we just wrote a resolution to affirm like our support for DSH, and particularly their community-based aspect of it. We talked to Yoonhee Prophet, who is a representative of the organization, and she really wanted to stress how DSH is a community-based organization, how most of their support has come from like individual community members showing up. And so our resolution also touched on how that was a really important aspect of the organization.
Okay. That's good. Good info. Thanks for that. So I don't know, Eric, I think we have Eric back on. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add. I think Sadie gave us kind of an overview. And Brendan, if you could pull up, well, Eric, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think Sadie gave a great review of the organization, the issue that's been facing the community, and our conversations with Drag Story Hour NYC as well. So curious if there's feedback from the committee, but in essence, we want to ensure that Drag Story Hour feels comfortable continuing to deliver their programming in and around the community, and that the people who are attending and the people who are delivering the programming also feel that sense of safety and comfort, which has really been interrupted these past few months, and unfortunately believe that it's going to continue going forward. And right now it's having an effect on their ability to deliver programming. They're working hard to come up with approaches to minimize the impact, but they're seeing it, and it would just be difficult and disappointing if our community lost access to their programming, which really focuses on inclusivity and helping young people navigate ideas of, gender diversity and identity in the community. So, Sadie really, had brought this to me, and we worked together to bring it to the committee. So thank you, Sadie.
All right. So I guess my only big question here, as having read this, is so who would be, so originally I thought it was something about the protests, but it's really just it's more about the programming itself and supporting. So have the protests, so I understand that they've gotten out of hand. I know the police department did some enforcement there, and obviously protests are going to happen regardless. But has there been any discussion about removing the programming based on anything, or is the programming still firmly intact?
As of right now, it's still happening, and everyone involved seems like determined to keep it running as smoothly as possible.
All right, so then I guess my next question is, who would this resolution be directed to? Are we asking the city council to keep funding it? Are we asking the libraries to keep? I mean, I'm sure the library has no intention of cutting the programming left to their own devices. But who are we asking?
And Matt, just if you could provide also some guidance for us and for the discussion, within our group, is our discussions with DHS. They were really looking for a sign of support from the community to continue the programming, because as Sadie was mentioning, they're really focused not so much on engaging, law enforcement per se and security measures, but on understanding that this is something that community wants to continue and persist, and looking for those kind of affirmations from different community organizations. And Sadie, if you had any comment from our conversation as well, I think that was the key point that the DSH was focused on.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can't really say anything about the protests specifically. I mean, if they become violent, we can condemn them. That's about all we can do. But I mean, for the most part, protests are protected by the First Amendment. So I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying. We can, consider this.
And Matt, could I just add one item, is, as you said, that is that I think the protests have started to become disruptive to the programming itself, being able to deliver it. And also, as you see in the resolution, there's been vandalism to, I believe, at least 3 or 4 city council members' homes as a result of this. And some of the performers also, sort of have been put at risk and intimidated. So there's a lot of activities that are going on that are sort of going beyond First Amendment and making your voice heard. So that's, I think, also why there's some concern.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and I've read similar accounts in the news, but yeah, I mean, we can certainly move forward with discussions here. Committee members, I'm going to open up to the rest of the committee. If you guys have any thoughts on this, anything we want to add, anything we disagree with. Go ahead, Seema.
Yeah, I'll just start by saying, like, I completely think, when I saw the articles and stuff that I think Brendan sent around, I was really enraged by this as well. When I think about it, contextualizing it back to like the Public Safety Committee, which is where we sit, and what's happening from a public safety perspective, I'm not seeing the connection because, first of all, it's not in our district. So even though there are implications that, people from our district could be, in attendance or utilize the service or whatever, that could be true for anywhere in the city, right? Like any of our members could go anywhere in the city, and then that would be,
Yeah, you could make the connection that that some of the library branches adjacent to the district serve the members of the district. But I was really looking at this as more of a human rights lens, more so than it's joint between safety and human rights. But I think programming kind of itself kind of falls under the human rights umbrella a little bit. And then the protests and the nature of the antagonizing is certainly a safety. So
okay.
you could make the argument both ways that it belongs in the committee.
Yeah, that's actually helpful. Thanks for providing that context and reminding me of the human rights element. I guess my second question, and I didn't read this in advance, and I'm sorry if it was circulated and I didn't get a chance to read it.
Yeah, I don't think we sent this out because I just saw
Okay.
it.
Yeah, so my reactions are like, what are we actually resolving to do? So if we could go look at that, that would be helpful for me. Uh, mm. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would strengthen the language then and say that, we don't support um like something specific related to human rights, as opposed to being like, yes, we love this program, we love the programming. I'd rather like contextualize it again back to, if it's the human rights element, if it's the local neighborhood institutions element, like I would rather say something like, um, and I'm having a tough time thinking of it on the spot, but that just kind of connects back to like some of what our actual like committee founding elements are. I know I'm speaking quite vaguely right now, but it's like, oh, we love this program and we think it provides like joy. I just don't feel like that's really saying anything at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the most of the the premise of it is fine, but yeah, I think we just need to solidify the resolved clauses and what we actually want to see accomplished. Obviously safe, I think from that standpoint we can say, these people are entitled to have the programming in a safe um, manner, I guess. But it's really, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we just need to clean up the resolves a little bit. I mean, to Seema's point, I'm not sure exactly what the right language is, but because ultimately we don't want, whether it's this program or another program, we don't want people, to start antagonizing others and harassing, and doing other illegal things simply because they don't agree with the nature of the program. So I think that should be a clear message from this committee and this board is everybody has a right to protest, but they need to do so respectfully and peacefully. And the programming should be allowed to continue without interruption.
Just to that point, like I agree with everything you're saying. I just want to add on and say that
Sure.
Yoon-hee, the representative, she said that she wanted to sort of stay away from any language regarding the protesters. She said it was sort of, she called it reactionary, I think was the term she used. And she said that it's just that she wanted to avoid giving them more attention. However, I also like see how we should be more direct and like have like a public, and our like resolved part should be like more relevant to public safety. But if we do want to like do our best to like honor the requests of DSH, I think we should stay away, like try our best to stay away from like using language that specifically calls out the protesters.
Yeah, I understand where she's coming from. The problem with that becomes now you're opening the door for everyone that has programming or offers programming, whether it be the libraries or somewhere in the community, can now come to us for support if they feel that their program is controversial or or is at risk for being cut somehow. So I think we still need to acknowledge the safety elements and the totality of the situation here, because otherwise now we're opening a can of worms that we really didn't intend to for everybody, for any other organization that holds programming.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
All right, let's go to Steve.
Thank you. I understand the spirit of this resolution. I haven't looked at the document, like Seema said. I'm playing also catch up to what happened with the protest. By the way, the New York Public Library System has amazing programs. I've attended many of these programs, and there are actually more controversial or just controversial programs than this that runs perfectly fine. The difference in this one is that you mentioned that there was some vandalism attacking some elected officials' homes. That's a different story. Protests are perfectly legal. Being dragged is perfectly legal. And now when it gets to the point where it's affecting the property and safety of individuals, that's where I think, I believe that is the spirit of this resolution, to show our support for this community, right? Because you also have to frame this way. It's a program that's it doesn't easily slide through any way to get the New York Public Library System to be a functioning program. And in addition to that, it's it was targeted specifically for them. It could be today, it could be the drag community, it could be the next community, just because they don't agree with the programming. And that's the thing that we have to show, even if this happens to the next community or this one again. I think it makes sense that the community board shows our support for this community, and to continue to feel confident to run programs like this without any retribution. Not talking about protesting, talking about fear for their public safety and their properties and their well-being.
Yeah, all of that is on the first whereas that's visible on the screen. So I think Sadie sums it up pretty well there. It's not just protesting; it's a lot of other things. I don't know. Can we scroll down, Brendan? I think it was the first one that was on display. Yeah. Violence, intimidation, fear mongering. So that's more along the lines of what's happening. Not protesting.
Yeah. And I would also, add, as I think Sadie alluded to before, that actually the programming has been interrupted. So while the programming is being delivered within the library, the protesters actually coming into the setting and disrupting the delivery of the programming. So it's a step beyond a group sort of protesting outside of the space. They're actively looking, like we said, to disrupt the programming and intimidate elected officials who are supporting this programming, intimidate the artists who are delivering it. And, again, the original conversations that Sadie and I had were really just a show of support from our community that, that they're welcome here. And, Matt, to your point, I understand that other organizations could come seeking that kind of support, but here it's in reaction. As you see here, there's been 6 incidents in December alone where, the drag story hours have been, interrupted and disrupted. So our understanding is it's going to continue. And we're hoping that what DSH wants is the community, signs that the community is supporting them because they're not looking, per se for law enforcement intervention. That's just not part of the values that they bring to their service and programming.
No, that's understood. And what I was saying is
Yeah.
we're gonna keep this stuff in there because it's material. It's
Yeah.
relevant situation. If we kind of take this out of the reso, then it becomes, we support this program. So that was the point I was making there, is that we that know that they don't want to draw attention to the disruptions that are occurring, but that's very relevant to the entire situation and needs to stay in the resolution. So, all right, it's 8:06 right now. So let's try to clean up these resolved clauses. Is there anything? So I think the committee is pretty close in terms of sentiment. We just kind of have to clean up the language a little bit, but some of that can be done after tonight. So I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're saying here. And then, so let's just go through. So therefore be it resolved, CV6 affirms its support of BSH NYC programming in our community and for the local institutions that fund and host them. Fine. But let's see. And then that CV6 supports the efforts taken by community allies to maintain. So I think it's just the further resolved. But I think we still need to basically say that joyful atmosphere, we can leave that in there, but I think we need to say a safe and comfortable environment, or something along those lines, needs to be mission.
Yeah. And Matt, and maybe we could clean up a little bit. I mean, it does say, to ensure the safety of families, DSH artists at the events, and the institutions that host the programming. So I think Sadie and I were trying to get that across. But if there's suggestions from you or Seema, or anyone else in the committee on the way we could convey that in a clearer manner, would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, so it's one thing to say that, to opine that these events should proceed, safely, and whatnot, but how do we accomplish that? I mean, obviously there's going to be a need for private security at some of these things. I don't know what that looks like today, and I don't know what that should look like, because I'm not exactly familiar with the numbers and whatnot, but I don't want to necessarily put a recommendation in there, but I think it's not, us passing this resolution is not going to, it will show support, yes, but will it make the programming any safer? I don't know. I don't think so, on the surface. So I think there's some additional action that the organizers are going to need to take to kind of shore things up on their own. I mean, that doesn't necessarily need to be part of the resolution, but just as the public safety person, based with everything I know about public safety, there's definitely a need for security here. And unfortunately, it extends beyond the borders of the walls in which the programming is occurring. As you can see, that anybody affiliated with it or supportive of it, can be attacked. And personally, I would not be surprised if people receive threats on this committee. So just keep that in mind too, that these people seem to be supporting, people going after anyone that does support the programming. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't pass a resolution because of that, but they have to understand that they need to, there may be more involved with security there. So, Seema?
This might be a weak resolution, but just throwing it out there. Like sometimes in our resolutions, we like call on others to like do their part. So I wonder if that's something that we can do here. So like we can say we call on NYPL leadership to ensure that, the events go on, without disturbance, like both to attendees and, people affiliated with the organization. Like, I wonder if there's someone that we can like directly spotlight to be like, hey, like, we want you to really like think about this seriously.
Yeah, I like where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I think maybe, their public library has their own security, but I would say from a resolution that they should be meeting with NYPD and other stakeholders regularly to assess the situation. It's going to be an evolving situation. So I think they should just be, meeting with, everybody involved, including including anybody that's attending the programming, just to, have regular security conversations, just to make sure. I mean, it would be a couple of different things. It would probably be smaller meetings with NYPD and other key stakeholders, which could be others impacted. And, I think they just need to keep in touch and keep assessing the situation until there's no issues anymore. But yeah, I mean, that would be kind of my outsider take on it. But yeah, they need to, they also need to be willing to invest in security, to be honest, which I don't know that they have the budget for. And I'm afraid that that's where there could be some challenges down the road. Anyway, Sadie.
I really agree with what Seema said about like calling on the NYPL, because already it's in one of the whereases. I don't remember exactly where. It's like, whereas like there have been training, like there have been like staff training, something. Like I don't remember if we specifically said like NYPL staff training or like training of those involved. Like already like NYPL internally has been taking, yes, that's where it is, like has been taking action. So I think because we already like sort of laid the groundwork that that's something that's been going on. I think doing like a resolved clause about like we want NYPD, not NYPD, NYPL to like continue doing security training and ensuring the security of the performers and attendees. I think that would be the best route to take.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think, okay, so your whereas that I think was pasted here, so now says, so I would say one of the resolve clauses should be DSH, NYC, and NYPL should continue their efforts towards de-escalation training, or not even specific to that, but just on the necessary training and protocols. And then the next part I would say something along the lines of they should also meet regularly with NYPD and other security partners and stakeholders to continue assessing the situation and adjust their response as needed, something along those lines. You guys can probably or we can work offline if the sentiment is agreed to. Sadie?
I like what Brendan just wrote down. However, to your point about like NYPD and stakeholders, like we were very, very like explicitly, strongly told not to mention NYPD or law enforcement, just because that intrinsically goes against what DSH believes in, because they're much more community focused, and like NYPD just with their ideas of like sort of community support and even like community-based safety. They talk about how community members have shown up and like tried to do their best to sort of like protect and distract the children attending. So it just, we can't like,
yeah,
he said that if we include any language about NYPD, it's not even worth it to pass the resolution. Like,
well, I understand their point of view, but they're not writing this resolution, and they're not the committee members here. I can tell you that, I mean, if they're not looking to involve law enforcement, then they're not making a genuine effort to ensure public safety, because their security and their programming only extends, once people exit the buildings, NYPD is responsible for everyone's security and safety. So if they're reluctant to meet with law enforcement, I understand that, they don't necessarily want a visible police presence at these events, and that's not what I'm suggesting, but they should be having private meetings to, because these people, and if it's not NYPD, then maybe they want to hire a security consultant. But they really need to be consulting security experts. I understand they're very small and community focused, but they need to be looking at the picture jointly with security experts. And if they're not willing to do that, then I can't help them maintain a safe environment. I just can't. And I think if we're not willing to recommend vital steps, I don't think this would even pass the board, or be questionable as to what we're actually advocating for. So I think we need to, obviously, safety is a critical thing here, and it's not, what's happening today is not acceptable. So to just ignore it, I think is the wrong thing to do. I think Seema and then Eric.
That's I'm hearing both sides. Honestly, I actually do think this should just go back to NYPL. Like, ultimately, they're in this situation as it relates to programming that's happening in the library. It's NYPL's just job or jurisdiction to make sure that everyone who's in the library feels safe. However they do that is kind of their call, whether it's training, whether it's de-escalation strategy, whether it's getting police officers in the library, whether it's doing private security, whatever it is. Like, I feel like the strongest argument we have is within the library structure. Let's make sure everyone is safe. Then I don't think we need to reference NYPD, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily have to reference the agency specifically, but my concern here is that they're trying to keep it tight inside, and they really need to reach out to certain experts, whether it's a private consultant or I don't know who they're talking to, but to me, it seems there's an obvious need to bring in other security experts here.
Well, I would say, isn't that ultimately NYPL's call to do that? Like, that's kind of, not every, like, let's say there's programming, 3 different community organizations coming in. They don't each bring in their own security guard, right? Like, NYPL has their own security guard that's there.
Correct. Yeah, in the building itself, yes. I mean, NYPL would be you're responsible there, but there's obviously broader reaching implications that extend beyond the borders of their building and what they're capable of. So that's why, I just fear for the safety of, what I didn't want to put this out in the public meeting, but, what I fear is some of them could be targeted, even more so than they already are. Some of them could be attacked directly, physically, there's obvious things there, and, de-escalation strategies are great. But if somebody comes up to you, with a knife or a gun, as you're leaving the building or as you're on your way home, because they didn't like the program you're presenting, that to me, there's a responsibility there to ensure that everybody is safe. And of course, I'm using an extreme example, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And that's what I fear might, we're already seeing a lot of a history of some really bad things happening. So I don't want anybody to be severely injured or killed. And some of this stuff, who knows what's capable here? But I think all of that needs to be considered here. Eric?
Add on that I do think DSH it's very focused on the safety, certainly of the artists, of their staff, of the people attending, and they are having conversations with NYPD and others around security. NYPD has been at many of these protests, ensuring order. I think it's a question of what they're looking to center as the response. And, their approach and their values is to center the community. And they've been very thankful that community allies have come out to really show their support. So I think, that's more the statement. They're not averse. They understand the role that safety needs to play in this. So I just wanted to underscore that. And I think this last resolve, as we've been sort of talking around, makes a lot of sense to sort of bring something back to, NYPL as we have here, I think works. And hopefully, then, it'd be acceptable to the committee.
All right, I think so. I think a fair compromise here. So we won't necessarily. So I would say NYPL ensure necessary training and protocols and maintain. I would say maintain regular contact with external partners or something along those lines. So that way, that could be the police department, could be private consultants, it could be other community advocates. But they need to make sure that they're laser focused on communication and collaboration with all the other partners involved, because this is not something that's wholly occurring within the library itself. This is a situation where anyone connected with the programming could be targeted. So it's it's a serious matter. It's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt. But I just don't want it to escalate into anything serious, or more so than it already is. All right, Stu. We gotta wrap.
Is there any reason to believe this isn't already happening? I mean, NYPL and NYPD seem to be on top of this, right? They're already talking, I would presume, and they understand the risks and the threat. I like the idea of a community board giving support to the program, but I don't see what kind of, beyond that, what kind of action we're asking for that's not already being undertaken.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I hear you, but my issue is, we're saying we support the programming and would like it to proceed safely, but issuing that statement is not going to accomplish that. So I think there needs to be continued conversations, and it's just, that's really all I'm saying is it's an evolving situation. Everybody needs to stay on top of it. And they need to make sure they're fully communicating with everybody outside the library. Because, based on what Sadie was saying, I'm concerned that they're trying to shy away from certain law enforcement aspects of it, because for a lot of the reasons that were described. So that's all I'm saying, is they absolutely need to be communicating with the necessary partners. I'm not going to define those here today, but that's really, God forbid, if anything else were to happen to any of these people, then want to make sure everybody's doing everything they can. So,
But are we asking for anything that's not already happening is my question.
I don't. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of this secondhand, so I've not been involved in the conversations with the stakeholders. But as an outsider on this one, I would say that it's just good practical advice to make sure that everybody's communicating wholly. That's really all I'm going to say on this one. I don't know what conversations are happening. I would hope that some are. Everything is moving forward, but it sounds like there's some hesitancy to involve law enforcement, which sparks a lot of this conversation. Seema, and then we gotta proceed.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be a little blunt. We often tell public officials to do their job. So it's not unusual for us to make those types of requests. I'm just literally looking through all of our CB6 public safety resolutions, and we're like, hey, federal government, do your job. Hey, Manhattan Borough President, do your job. That's literally what we're doing. So yeah.
You're not wrong. Sometimes as a community board, that's our role. is to, you know, make sure people are doing their job. So, I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but anyway. Stu, and then we got to, hopefully somebody will call the question.
I have no problem with asking officials to do their job. I'm just not clear that they're not doing it right now, and I'm not sure why we're asking for something that may already be happening.
It may be, but I think the fact that we're being asked, you know, to lend support, tells me that the situation could also get out of hand, and to the point where people say, hey, you know, this programming isn't worth all the trouble, which is, I think, why Sadie and Eric brought this to us in the first place. So I just want to make sure that, you know, everybody is, you know, that they're basically involving every stakeholder before it gets to anything like that. So that's really all this is designed to state. Anything else? Does anybody want to offer any other changes, any proposals? Do we want to call the question? Proceed to a vote? Seema?
Yeah, I would like to call to question with the amended resolution.
All right, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, Eric has seconded. So Brendan, conduct the vote.
Yeah, I'll conduct the vote, but before doing so, just so that I make sure I'm clear, the amendment refers to what I have here in red, correct? Or is it
Yes.
something a little bit different? Okay, just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, we can
verify.
tweak the language, but the sentiment is going to be as it was laid out there.
Okay, so when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Stu Desser,
In favor?
Eric Goldberg,
In favor?
Sadie Howard,
In favor.
Steve O,
In favor.
Matt Roberts,
In favor?
Seema Shaw,
In favor.
Lou Sapersky,
We have to unmute.
I see him mouthing in favor, but he's muted.
yeah.
Lou,
So
give us a
Lou.
thumbs up.
Yeah, you can give us a thumbs up if you're in favor.
In favor.
Okay,
I had no.
so with 7 in favor, nobody opposed, nobody abstaining, the resolution passes.
All right, very good. Thanks, Brendan, and thanks Sadie and Eric for taking the lead on this one, bringing this to our attention. So this will proceed to the full board in February. And that concludes agenda item number 3, Chair's report. I'm going to be very quick here because we're already 2 hours in. Really what we're looking, so as we discussed, we'll have a continued conversation next month on the shelter security. Hopefully we'll be joined by DHS and any other stakeholders. Other than that, that's pretty much all I have. There will be a new precinct commander at the 13th precinct to be named soon. So we will hopefully hear from that person sometime in the spring, I would hope. And then the other thing we're going to look at hopefully next month is some of the mental health provisions that were part of the governor's State of the State address. So I know Seema's done some work on that. So we're going to hopefully take a closer look on that, at some of that, and see what we like, what we don't like, what we recommend, and some of the other safety issues there at the state level. So that is all I have for now. If you guys have any other issues that you want to bring up in committee, just send me an email. We can certainly work through that offline. Or that brings us to old or new business. Does anybody have any items of old or new business? So please raise your hand. All right, seeing none, we will adjourn at 8:31. So Thanks, everybody, for your participation. I know we went a little long tonight. Hopefully, we'll try to keep these meetings to 90 minutes or less going forward. But it's been a few months since I let this go a little longer.